Okay, so we were going to discuss this last week, but we literally ran out of
Right.
time. This week, we have some time. Recently, CitizenCon 2024, quote unquote, well, I was going to say dropped, but it
It
happened.
happens.
It happened. And there's YouTube evidence that suggests that it did happen. Alex has watched it. You're quite excited
Yeah,
by it, right?
there's a lot of things that they showed off this year. Each year, this is just a little convention and or conference where the developers at Cloud Imperium Games present kind of like the future roadmap of what's going to be happening in Star Citizen, which is like the MMO portion of what Chris Roberts is doing there. And then the last 2 years, they've shown off stuff about Squadron 42, which was going to be imminent. Now it's a little bit less imminent, but it's still imminent, I guess. But on the Star Citizen side of things, they basically published the roadmap to 1.0, which is the reviewable, this game is out, and then you can play it with a lot of the game systems already in kind of thing. And on the tech side of it, not talking about gameplay stuff, they talked about how they're switching over to a new planetary tech system where the idea of the previous one was to flesh out like point of interests that are scattered across like a solar system, right? And in between that, there are artist designed kind of like biome sets that are then populating through the area. And the rules dictating that, like how they're populated, are not like physically accurate necessarily. And also they meant a lot of hardcore art time to get them working. And they wouldn't necessarily look like the team wanted them to look in terms of like physical plausibility of the environment, as well as a number of other things like pop in terms of terrain and trees. And last year they demoed a new water system, which was really cool. And that's in game right now. And based upon the principles of that, which is like virtualizing like a large like chunk of terrain and streaming in detail, they're applying a similar principle here to their latest version of planetary tech. And it like gets rid of all the terrain popping that you can see possibly. And they showed off a number of really cool new biomes that they're going to be debuting with it when 1.0 hits, including like crisis style jungles, which looked really awesome. They showed off swamplands as well too, which looked really, really good. And they had a whole lot of presentations covering what this all means. There was like an audio tech presentation about them adding in like Doppler to the game, and speed of sound kind of stuff to be more systemic. They also had a presentation there covering their progress into RTGI, which is apparently a huge undertaking for them because they've currently lit the game using like cube map probes and stuff like that, and then switching over all the game content to not be using that, but RTGI plus RT reflections is apparently a lot of work because they've already arted the game in one way, including Squadron 42. So they showed off there basically that they have now a system for lighting and relighting particles, as well as volumetric fog using RTGI, as well as RT reflections for opaque surfaces now, covering the full range of reflectivity. So from 0 to 1, and not just like ultra hyper mirror reflections and stuff like that, which was great. But that was the one part of the presentation where I was like, I want to know more. What are you doing? But it was only like 10 minutes long. And a number of other things like that, basically showing off how they're going to make the game move over to its 1.0 state, which was really cool for those who are following Star Citizen. But for those who don't care about Star Citizen and just kind of want a new wing commander, I think John is right there. They showed off I don't even know how long it was. It must have been like an hour and 20-minute long prologue.
Yep. Hour 16 minutes.
Prologue of Squadron 42. It's the intro to the game, basically, before you actually join the crew on your Idris ship later after this. Like you start off first, I don't know, I think it's like a hammerhead, some large capital ship sized thing. And there's a lot of interesting aspects of that I want to talk about. One, just to like get out of the way, it's actually not using the RTGI or RT reflections, which was noticeable on a lot of scenes actually. So it's obviously not using like the latest version of the tech that they have out there, but it was just whatever they polished up for the show. And it shows off a lot of interesting aspects of the Star engine at this point in time. They've been developing the game originally, like the original pitch was, it's going to be a lot more like a traditional styled game where there's hidden loading screens, kind of like Starfield, where you go from one area to the next and they maybe show like an animation of a ship moving, but it would just be like typical levels. And they scrapped all that years ago. And they said, no, we're going to use the tech we're developing for Star Citizen to make this game. And as a result of that, there's some pretty cool streaming and really large scale scene stuff going on that the tech from Star Citizen makes possible in a single player game, which I thought was really cool. Oh yeah, so this is a cool one. So at like 1612 in the video, they're referencing the planet below them, which is Vega. And they reference it, and then they immediately do a camera cut to planet side, and then they back up to the ships again, which is really cool. Obviously, so cool. That's not something you usually see in a lot of games, like just switching to like, you know, thousands of kilometers apart and variety of density there too. They're completely different assets and whatnot. Another thing that was really cool is that like 3939, they show like the battlescape, and then the camera goes through the battlescape into the bridge of the Vendul kingship there, and you can see it like transition into the ship bridge. And that's another thing that's like necessary for Star Citizen purposes, but not for a single player game, where basically the physical locations of the actual ships themselves, like there's actually a real bridge there. It's not like just some offhand scene somewhere else, but all the ships are made to be like a physical size where you can walk through them and, you know, be around them and make sense, instead of just being like an offhand thing they just developed for a cutscene. It's like, no, actually it zooms into the physical bridge of the ship, which I thought was really cool. Another cool thing that it shows off two versions of like similar tech that I'm talking about here, like this really quick streaming stuff, as well as something else, is that 42 minutes in, the character Admiral Bishop, played by Gary Oldman, says go, and it shows then a hologram of what is Squadron 42, these ships kind of decked out behind a series of asteroids, and it switches from the hologram view immediately to the real in-game view of those ships. And obviously that's streaming and stuff like that too, but the reason why they can show the hologram and the ships at the same time in the same physical locations is because Star Citizen and Squadron use like a really cool render to texture system where the entire game world can be pulled up on a hologram and simplified, essentially. So when they show the hologram, it's actually those ships in the game world with just a different camera on them with a different shader. So they can just switch, you know, really quickly. And it's actually like a really smart idea, instead of having to like manually make some holograms like that for an entire game that's going to be huge. So that was some cool stuff that I saw. And then we also got to see for the first time the push and pull system for zero-G physics, where in Star Citizen, as is right now, you move around with like mini thrusters on your space gear. But for those moments when you don't have space gear attached that has thrusters, and specifically for Squadron, where you're not going to be in a spacesuit all the time that will have such things, they made a push and pull system, kind of like Dead Space 2's, or is it a little bit, where you'd move from like platform to platform by jumping. And they showed that off, I think, like at a little bit further into the trailer after like kind of all hell breaks loose and the ship detonates. It's like a zero-G, it's like 60 minutes or something like that. Just some other really things that I thought were, before I get to critiques, things that I thought were really, really cool were the main menu is very old school PC game kind of thing, where it's like a 3D scene and you navigate it. They show that off in the beginning. It's like a series of bunk beds and a whole bunch of other stuff.
It's like TIE Fighter right there. It's like Wing Commander itself.
TIE Fighter. It's really cool. As well as when the Vandul characters speak, I do enjoy the nice little UI that they do there, where it shows first the alien characters that then switch over to English language.
It's so cool.
Very cool stuff. But I got some critiques too. Yeah, I'm always that guy. I would say lighting is off, and I think that's mainly just from the game this is not the RTGI, this is not RT Reflections. So there's a lot of like ugly cube maps in this trailer if you look around for them. There's also some bad SSR. It's like really old CryEngine SSR at this point because that is legacy. There's also, I think the biggest issue with the visuals in the trailer is the shadow maps. They are going wild. Like these scenes are probably hundreds of kilometers across, not more, in these starscapes, and whatever they're doing for shadow maps at the current stage right here is not holding up. Like there's huge shadow acne, there's large aliasing, there's disconnected objects because shadows are Peter panning, where the shadow doesn't connect with the actual object casting it due to just the cameras not being aligned with the geometry correctly at the viewing angle. And it's kind of sucks because I think they're probably going to change that over time. But the ships and the characters and the scenes have so much geometric detail that it's actually getting lost in the lighting and the poor shadowing, which makes a lot of scenes look unstable visually. Another thing that I noticed is that the game has motion blur, and they've worked on this in the past, I know, but like something is a little off about it. The trailer was presented at 60 FPS with a lot of frame rate variability. But like sometimes it would seem like objects were moving in a direction and the motion blur was thinking it was moving perhaps at a different velocity. So like they would blur in a way that my mind's eye didn't expect. And maybe that just means like motion vectors aren't working or something else ain't right. It's kind of something that I criticized also like way back in the day. I think it was like when Avatar, they showed it off for the first time. Like the motion blur just didn't look right. It bothered me. Also, another thing is that depth of field is pretty good throughout the trailer, but there's a number of moments where like when it mixes with bloom on the sides of someone's face, like the bloom is blooming out against the side of someone's like paler face, for example, like Gillian Anderson's character. And there's like a rim light that is caught in the depth of field, so it looks like their face is haloed. Oh, yeah. That's a pretty typical depth of field issue. Not all games suffer from it always, and I don't know if it's like an art setup thing or if it's actually just something that is a necessary byproduct of keeping the depth of field performant. But it's something that happens in a couple scenes and takes away from like thinking like your brain goes immediately to, oh, this is like a cool CGI character, to like, oh, this is a video game. And that's one thing I thought about. But, you know, other than that, I thought it looked pretty awesome. I would have loved to have seen like more ship combat, but this is the prologue when you're not a pilot yet. So I can forgive it for that. But I thought it was pretty sweet.
Cool. I've just got one question, Alex. The road to 1.0, the roadmap, does it have any dates?
No. No.
Come on,
but Squadron now has a date. It's 2026. They actually say that at the end of the trailer.
Of course.
So that's the year after next. Of course it is. And but in terms of when I can cover Star Citizen again,
whoa, hold on a minute. You said imminent.
I said imminent, but not imminent. If you recall.
He has a concept of a release date.
Citizen. It's called Citizen COD, Rich, not Citizen Concept. But in terms of when I can cover Star Citizen again, which I've wanted to do for a while, is the next release is 4.0, which is, I guess, at the end of this year. And that includes server meshing. Wow. And Vulkan's been in the game for a while, but I've wanted to cover it again when server meshing's in. And that'll be the first public release of server meshing. So that'll be fun. I guess I would like to cover it then maybe in the new year based upon how much time we got.
Would you though? Because we were expecting a Star Citizen video from you when the Vulcan went in. That took years to arrive. Yeah. It arrived and you never did the video. There seems to be a kind of meshing of philosophies between you and the developer here, where, you know, stuff happens.
Kick the can on down the road.
It's
and it sort of arrives years on down the road.
Let me just say, it's hard to get away from things. Like if I want to cover a game like this, like I have to have like a lot of recordings and a lot of time, and maybe to show off things like multi-crew spaceships, I have to like write to people that play the game and say like, would you spend some time recording with me? Like it's like it's an endeavor. John knows that. Like, you have to plan a video about something and not just like show it off in a bad way, because that sucks.
Right.